Well, thank you so much, Emily, for joining this podcast episode. Really excited to hear you about your journey, your experience as Syncro. So I guess the first thing we could start off with is, could you provide a short introduction about yourself, background, interest, or hobbies?
Yes, absolutely. So I was born and raised in Montreal in Canada, but I call Boston home now. I, from an early age, was given no choice but to get a degree in computer engineering or some type of engineering by my parents. I chose computer, which was, in hindsight, very wise, given how old I am now. Computers weren't exactly all the rage when I was at university age. But that's panned out very, very well for me in my career. And then I was really fortunate to move to Boston early in my career and join a startup very early in my career and be exposed to all sorts of functions and jobs and challenges of running and building a business, which I think has given me a good appreciation for being CEO now at Syncro, and that there's many different domains and challenges that people are facing. So it was a really good learning ground for me really, really early on. And I also got the startup bug from that. So yeah, that's a bit about my background.
That's great. And I actually do have a few questions on that. But before we go into that, one of the questions that I like to ask to every single podcast guest that we have here is, if you had all the time in the world, what would you be doing?
Oh my gosh, everything. If I had all the time, why I wouldn't have to choose, right? Because I could do everything. This morning, I spent 4 hours in the art studio down the street doing stained glass. I could do another 4. So if I had all the time in the world, but I got hungry, so I had to come home and eat lunch. Yeah, if I had all the time, I love to learn. So I would be doing everything I possibly could try to do. Nothing with heights, maybe, would be my limit. Those are things I would need to try. But everything else, yeah, oh my, time is, especially as a leader, but a human being, it's the one, a lot of times the one constraint. So yeah, as a CEO especially, it's the thing I think about all the time is what should I prioritize, right? So if I had all the time, I don't know, it would solve a lot of my problems.
So it kind of sounds like your default was non-work related, but it also kind of sounds like, well, I have all these things I want to do as CEO, so that's what I would want to do too. So are you the type of person that would be like, ideally, if I had all the money in the world, I would not work and just do all these cool hobbies like stained glass or work on art or travel the world or anything else like that? Or you actually do want to do that work and you want to do that 24/7 without burnout, of course?
That's a good question. I think it would be a balance. I've thought about, what does retirement maybe look like one day? Try to imagine it. I think it's hard to imagine until you get there. But I've tried to think about it. And I'm very bad at being bored. Or when I'm bored, it's very bad for other people and me. So I need to find a way to be busy. So maybe I could be learning enough and be challenged enough and not be doing anything in the tech space or in the leadership space. But I really enjoy being a leader. So I think that, coaching or consulting or staying involved somehow is probably in the cards for me for quite a while. So I think it would be a blend of, non-work and then work related activities if I had all the time.
We're actually very similar in that way where I try to look into how retirement looks like for me. I'm I'd probably be working until I die. Probably not doing work I don't like, at least, but I would do work that I enjoy. If money allows, I would probably do whatever I want to do, almost like venture capital. But at the end of the day, I would still be working. I can't imagine myself just sitting at the beach for 24/7 and just sitting there for years and years. I don't know. That's not me.
Yeah, maybe for a few months to recover, right? The first few months of sitting at the beach would be totally fine. And then after that, problems would happen.
Mm-hmm. So you're CEO of Syncro. How has that been? How did you first get into it? Was it the idea came out first, or what specifically inspired you to help found Syncro?
Yeah, so a quick correction or clarification. So I didn't found Syncro. I joined Syncro at the end of 2021. And the company had been around for a few years. So I didn't found Syncro, but I am the CEO. So I didn't have the original idea for Syncro, but I've been in the MSP space for a number of years, and I worked at another company in the space for quite a while, over 5 years prior to being at Syncro. So I don't know if your audience knows what MSP means, and I hate using acronyms, so I'll explain. That stands for Managed Service Providers, and Managed Service Providers are folks who help small, medium businesses who can't afford a full-time IT person, but who have IT needs all the same, right? Like there's hardly a small, medium business out there today that doesn't need at least a website and has some kind of computer that they use or point of sale or something, right, that they need to run their business. And so MSPs are there to help serve all of their IT needs, make all of their systems work together so that they can run their business and sell their products. And I've been in the MSP space for a while. And so that's how I came to join Syncro. And so I didn't have the idea to found Syncro, but I really know the MSP space and their business needs. So I am very happy to still be in the space and be helping MSPs.
Of course. And what actually attracted you to the MSP space to begin with? It kind of seems a little bit random. Most people think like, ooh, AI, cool.
Yeah, MSP space is not flashy. And it's also not very well known. I think, a lot of folks in sort of enterprise tech would consider it a niche market, but it is a very, very large industry. Every SMB around the world needs help with IT these days, like I said. So there's just a growing need for MSPs, and the technology is getting more complex. Security threats are getting harder to deal with and more pervasive, right? And so everybody who's doing business has come to rely on MSPs. So why I like this space, I mean, these are basically folks who, are using technology, but also running a business. So they've got really two competing challenges going on, or two very important challenges going on. And usually they're very good at technology and maybe aren't so familiar with aspects of running a business. They just thought, oh, well, I've got some tech skills, I'll put them to use. But learning how to run a business, manage people, grow a business, get new customers is something that's foreign to them. And I find that challenge, the mix of technology and the business part, very, very fascinating.
Amazing. And so how did you first get into it? Did you see like a job opening for CEO, or did someone reach out to you?
Yes. So how I came to Syncro is different than how I came to the MSP space, which you asked, but I didn't answer. I actually, like maybe a lot of things in people's careers, I kind of accidentally got into the MSP space. So I was working at a company called Backupify. I worked there for a couple of years, and we were acquired by a company in the MSP space. So I didn't really know anything about MSPs before that time. That was like the end of 2014. And that's how I came to understand what MSP even meant and grow from there. And I was fortunate enough, that was a company called Datto that bought us, which is a large vendor in the space, and grew really, really quickly. And so I had the opportunity to learn a lot through that like high growth phase at Datto. And then I left the MSP space for a little while, took a little break, did some other things. I worked at a company called Alice in marketing technology. And then the Syncro opportunity came knocking, and I was very excited to get back to a tech buyer, because all of our buyers are sort of in IT, and get back to MSPs and their business challenges.
Right. So can you also tell me a little bit about your day in your life? Because I feel like before, if you were a co-founder CEO, it does look a little bit different than if you came into this space where it's like somewhat established. Were you in when it's early stage or a little bit more on the mature stage?
Yeah, I would say, Syncro is still a small company. We have about 100 people who work at Syncro, so it's not really a startup anymore. Our technology, is established. We have product market fit, but there still are a lot of challenges to grow the business. So it's still an early stage company for sure. And I think that's very different than being, I don't know if it's so much the co-found, being the founder or not. It's just a different stage of the business. So I think after you find product market fit and before, those are two very different, maybe roles of a CEO. And we also serve very early growth MSPs. So these are like 1, 2, 3 people businesses. They're very, very small. just starting out. So I don't have like, I don't get on phone calls to sell deals. It's just not, our product is self-serve on the website. That's just not what I'm needed to do. A lot of my day-to-day is building a good team, making the path for the company, the strategy clear to everybody, answer questions, debate, if the strategy is right, if it should be changed, deal with things happening in the world, and how does Syncro relate to that, and how can we help our employees and our partners, our MSP partners, kind of get better over time. Our company mission is to make MSPs' lives better. So that's like constantly top of mind and something that I work on every day.
So speaking of top of mind, what is top of mind for you with Syncro in the next 3 months or so?
Good time. I thought you were going to say 3 years, and I was like, too far, too long. Although we do have a plan, 3 months is a good period of time. Even a year I can kind of see, although the years lately have been kind of crazy and hard to foresee, right? So we're trying to grow overall. Even in the next 3 months, we're trying to grow. And we have a lot of, our partners are trying to grow too, through some interesting economic times, right? So the next 3 months, I want to make sure we're growing profitably, because I don't want to make any hard decisions like you see a lot of tech companies making these days. And so far we're in a good position. So I want to make sure that stays the same and our employees have secure jobs and also opportunities to grow through this period. From the technology front, our MSPs are growing and their product needs are changing as a result of that. So our product roadmap over the next 3 months is really oriented to help them with new challenges that they're having at their business. So that's another focus for the next 3 months. Let's see, I'm trying to think. We have like departmental goals. There's so many goals for like Q1 already. But those are some of the main ones. Sort of grow the company and grow the product in the ways that our customers want us to.
Yeah, and I feel like around this time of this world, I guess it's probably a really difficult time for a lot of leaders, especially with like one decision could drastically change the future, maybe even need to lead to some layoffs, and hopefully that doesn't happen. So how do you exactly handle that pressure? Who do you really rely on for advisors or anything like that to be able to have an informed decision?
Yeah. Well, so like you said, we're not on the course to have to do anything like that, but there are hard decisions every day or month, right, that come up. That's kind of part of the job. So, for advisors, I have a good team, I think. So one, I have my executive team at the company, and, I hire people who are smart, nice, and get things done. So they're a great sort of set of advisors, and they are experts in their teams, in their functions. So I rely on them a lot, when we have to make business decisions. Syncro has a board. So the board of directors, also very helpful. We have meetings and I can ask their advice. And then personally, I think it's always helpful to have someone, or more, if you're lucky, more than one person you can go to that's not necessarily your boss or that you work with and that's in your company day to day, but has a good background and can give you solid guidance. So I have an exec coach that I can go to and talk to. And then I have several friends whose opinions I trust, who may have been CEOs or are familiar with the challenges, that I can go to and say, like, this doesn't feel right, or, just an objective point of view that's not connected to my career progression in any way, can't influence, if anything at the company, but whose opinion I value. So that's kind of my go-to circle.
That's great. I was always wondering about that too, because I feel like for some people at least, once you're that high up as CEO, you're like, well, I don't have anyone I can rely on, because everyone, of course, has some kind of interest in the company. So naturally, they're going to want to influence it in a selfish way. So like, let's say, for example, if I were to be CEO of a company right now, a lot of my friends are not even close to tech in general. So what kind of, how do you even find those friends, or other, like in your case, you said you also have friends that have been CEOs or they are CEOs. How did you find them to begin with, or even your executive coach?
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, that was a lot of questions. How did I find my friend? Okay, wait, I'm writing this down because I already didn't answer one of your questions before. Okay, so how did I find my executive coach? I was fortunate enough that my boss at Backupify, the company I worked for that got acquired, believed that every executive should have a coach. And so he instilled in me, it's like basketball players have a coach. So every executive needs a coach. And so since then, since 2012, I have had a coach almost constantly, different folks rotating, because I think you can learn things from different people. But the coach I have now is someone that I met a few years ago, then kind of took a break, and now I'm re-engaged. So it's just someone I met through having a coach through work. But then now I sort of work with like personally or independently from the company. In terms of like other folks, I think it's really important. I've picked up folks along the way. Like you said, who's the CEO going to go to? I've picked up folks along the way that have complementary skills to my own. Those are the people I kind of file away or like take note to myself that like, oh, I don't know, I'm not a marketing expert. I've worked in tech support, I've worked in product management, I've worked as an engineer. So like I know those things from experience, but I've never worked on a marketing team at a company before. So if I find a friend or I make a friend at work and then, I go on in my career, I'll know, oh, that's someone I can go to when I have marketing questions perhaps in the future. So I kind of catalog who do I know, who's in my network, who's I've worked with that I trust their opinion on a certain domain I might not be an expert in. And then I think the last thing is it's really important to have a team. I know the exec team works for me. So yes, they could influence me or they could be selfish or they could say what I want to hear or whatever, right? But I think I've been very lucky and I think it's a sign of a good leader, hopefully, that I love to create teams that are there working for the company and the employees and not for themselves. I think that's one of the most important things about being a good leader, actually. Is you're not there to be selfish or to argue for your team's position or your growth. It's really about the company, because if the company grows, you will have opportunities, right? If you were a part of that and contributed. So at Syncro, for example, I have a really great team. We are there for the company's success. And you can always tell those people, right? I can smell them. I can smell them coming when they're like, I know this guy or this girl or whoever is going to ask me for something, right? That like they're in it to prove themselves or to get something out of it. You can tell that a mile away. And you can tell the people who don't act like that. And so I think it's really important to create a team, a peer team, whatever it is, whatever level you're at, of folks who understand like the greater goal and that everybody will benefit if the company benefits.
That's great. And I think you actually mentioned this before, but like you said before, you try to reach out to people that complement your skills, in this case, marketing. So you came from a computer engineering background and now you're in a CEO position where you're managing people. You're probably doing a lot of business day to day. So how exactly did you do that? How much of your computer engineering background did you use in this? And how much did you pick up along the way doing that?
I wish I had a good answer for you. The computer engineering part of my brain wants to be like, I use 55% of my engineering degree. But I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I do know that, why my parents wanted me to be an engineer was because they believed it was a solid foundation in a lot of different things, a lot of different skills, right? Physics, I learned math, logical thinking. I got to take electives, so I learned how to write a paper, like writing skills, communications. Like I feel like it was a good foundation, and those kinds of things I use every day. Do I, code every day? No. So I don't use the computer science necessarily, but I do use it when, if we're struggling launching a feature or, people want to talk about tech debt. Like I do use some of those principles even to be able to understand and engage in conversations day to day. So I do think it's a really important foundation for like a tech leader to have some sort of appreciation for computer science and like logical thinking. And then I think for me, particularly because our buyers are tech people, I think it helps me relate. Right? They may not be computer engineers, they may not be computer scientists, they might, but they're in IT. And so I can speak that language as well. And I understand their challenges. Definitely, I have learned leadership skills kind of on top of that though throughout my career. that are kind of separate. I was thinking, you know, I did do some innovation during my degree, but I didn't really have a lot of chance to practice leadership in my undergrad. I think a lot of those skills, soft skills, leadership skills, you know, decision making, came through my career.
That's great. And actually, this brought me to a question I had myself when I was 18, looking into college programs and what majors and minors or anything like that I should be considering. And one of the things was like, I want to be CEO one day, but I want to be in a tech company. Should I go the computer science route? Should I do the business route? Should I do something completely different? So let's say you have this 18-year-old girl in front of you and says like, what should I do as my major? What would be your suggestion?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I struggled with it probably like you did, and like many people do, right? So I think I wanted my parents had a want, and I wanted to be an artist or a musician. So I played the violin. I left my engineering degree for a year to do an art education, and then I went back. So I think a lot of people struggle with that. It's a really relevant question. I think it's hard to answer as a general, like you should, you know, do something. Definitely, if you have the opportunity and you are fortunate enough and feel capable enough to do an engineering degree, it worked for me. I can say that. And if you are, if you're interested in that and motivated to get through it, I don't think you can go wrong going down that path. Like I said, I think it's a solid foundation. But the other thing that I've been reflecting on lately, which might be a good answer, is that like life is full of transitions. And I think, you know, I think a lot of the crisis about going to university and picking a path and all of this is enforced because, you know, we kind of are used to the fact that life is linear, or we think that life is linear. And so I think if I had the 18-year-old in front of me saying, what should I do? I would try to explain that I don't know that it's this fork that you could never go back to. I think, you know, that there's circles here. There's going to be other chances and opportunities. So choose something that, you know, you feel like you can get through, that you're interested in, and then you'll go from there, right? You'll learn, and then you can reevaluate, and you can go from there.
Actually, I feel like this could be relevant to something we talked about off camera, but you said you did master's degree as well. Is that business related or tech related still? Like, did that help you in your role right now?
Good question. So I did my bachelor's of engineering, and then a few years later, I did my master's of art education at BU. So I did 1 year of undergrad of art ed, then I went back and finished my computer degree. And years later, I was like, oh, I'm still really interested in teaching art. And so while I was working, I finished my master's of art ed online. So it's interesting though, because you would think maybe that doesn't help me as CEO, but I think it really, really does. A lot of a master's of art ed is about how people learn and how to communicate concepts. I think visual concepts as a CEO, as a leader, are very important, right? To know that there's more languages than just verbal and words on a paper, that you can use other images, feelings to evoke passion in your employees. So I think actually that the Masters of Art, and I did a lot of writing, so, and I did a lot of like, you know, creative drawing, painting, that kind of thing. So I think it's helped me see that there's different ways of going about being a leader. So I think it's helped.
Interesting. I honestly did not expect you to say art. Was that something like before Syncro, something you did while you were in the middle of working, or you're just like, I want to do something?
Yeah, that was prior to Syncro. It was probably about 20 years ago that I did my Masters of Art Ed. Yeah, maybe 15, something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So one big topic that I feel like most people want to learn about is that how was your experience as a female CEO particularly? Do you feel like it was similar to someone if let's say they have a male CEO of the same kind of role, same background as you? Do you feel like your path was similar or even completely different based off of you being female?
Well, I think the experience and the path are two different questions. I don't know, the path might be similar in that I think to be a good CEO, you have to learn a lot of different leadership skills. So I think the path could be similar. The experience, I think is different, but I think it's different for, almost everybody, right? Because I think people just have their different perspectives and what they choose to focus on. So, I think every CEO's experience is a little, every person, but every CEO's experience is a bit unique, given their background and their outlook. So I do know that obviously being a female CEO is more rare than being a male CEO, and so I am aware of that. But I also really embrace that. I love that part. I think it's, I don't know, again, percentage-wise, how much of the motivation for me being in this role, but it's a good percentage of the reason why I am a CEO and why I enjoy the challenge is that I enjoy that other people who might see themselves in me can see that it's possible. And so I try to live up to the expectations there.
What advice do you have for aspiring female CEOs?
Oof, that would have to be a whole other show. No, just kidding. What advice do I have? I think some things that served me well on the path here are a few things. One, I would say take risks. I am a risk taker, informed risks, nothing crazy, but I have always had sort of a low sense for job security, which I think has helped. It's not founded in the fact that like I have a trust fund of all that or anything, so it's just not logical, unfortunately. But I think it served me really well in that I've been, it's allowed me to sort of be true to myself at times when I was challenged, and also to take on risks instead of shying away from them because of what might go wrong, right? And I'm not an optimist either. So I recognize things can go wrong, but I think taking risks is the way that people learn. And so if you can take informed risks, supported risks, calculated risks, you'll learn faster. You'll learn more and you'll learn faster. I think that, I definitely was a hard worker. And I don't mean like number of hours, although in tech, it is hard to separate those sometimes. I do try to have a better work-life balance now and have that from our employees too. So when I mean hard work, I mean like I put my all into it, right? And so I think that's really, really important. And then I think luck. A lot of, and I'm really, really fortunate to be in this position, but I think it does take some luck, and it takes some luck to work with people who are very smart and who you can learn from. So that would be some advice.
That's great. And actually, you kind of answered one of the questions I was actually going to ask next, which was Startup Grind is known to basically sacrifice your health, your time, your money, your social life. And especially being a woman, like I've had parents that say like, you should get married, you need to have kids or go date or something. And like when that happens, like how do you balance your career as well as everything else?
Yeah. So I was lucky enough to have Ursula Burns on the board at Datto and get to know her. And she said something that really was helpful to me in this regard of how do you balance family obligations and work as a CEO in particular. And she always recommended that you look at things in sort of a longer term horizon. So yes, today you might have had to choose work over, going to a violin practice or whatever. But try to choose the things that matter and don't measure yourself every day. Measure yourself over longer periods of time and try to make space for those equal parts of your life, over time. So don't every 24 hours you think you're a failure because you worked too hard, or conversely you were on vacation and you didn't work, whatever the chance may be. So I think that's really been advice that I try to reflect on. And then you said, what would I do if I had so many hours in the day or like had all the time in the world? That is really the question, right? I think a lot of people spend a lot of time at work because they don't consciously think of what they're giving up by not working. And so I really deliberately schedule things that are not work. I think I have a pretty good work-life balance. I don't work on Fridays. So we have focus Fridays at Syncro. So we don't have any recurring meetings, which a lot of companies do, or, are moving towards like the 4-day work week. We have a wellness day off once a month where nobody works because I think collective breaks are important, right? It's taking a vacation is okay, but then when you come back to a mountain of work, sometimes you're thinking about your mountain when you're on vacation. So we try to take breaks together. That way, no one is coming back to a pile of things. So I think there's different strategies like that you can employ to help you kind of keep focus on one thing or the other, not be distracted as well.
That's great. And actually, you just reminded me of one time we went, my fiance now, I guess, are going on vacation. And all of a sudden he's like, oh my God, look at this. My inbox is climbing to the thousands. I'm like, oh, don't look at your inbox. Why are you looking at your inbox to begin with? Just put that away and deal with it when you come back.
Yeah.
But it's just like,
app.
yeah, it's just the fact that he has like these growing numbers and he's like, I want to make sure it's manageable when I come back. So that collective break for the entire company, that actually, now I see like the benefit of that. At first I was like, you're just going to have a day off, but you're still going to think about work. But if everyone's taking the time off, you won't be thinking about that much of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also one other thing, about work-life balance is that, Syncro is fully remote. I work from home. So, and all of our employees do too. And so I think like my kids come home from school and they're in my work. Like, I mean, they're like the dividing line between these things when you're a remote company. It's like, you can start to get creative, right? I can go for a walk, I can get exercise, which might be a personal thing, but I can have a meeting at the same time. I can drive my kids to school, but maybe I can take a quick call for 5 minutes while I'm in the car with them, but the rest of the time I'm talking to, so there's like, I don't know, the dividing line is not so black and white anymore. And I think there's lots of creative ways to help sort of do both things.
Yeah, did you feel that during the pandemic that has helped a little bit? Because I feel like in the past, most people were not really remote. Was Syncro remote before the pandemic?
Syncro was remote since about 2017. It's been a remote company. But yes, a lot of companies obviously were forced to shift. I was working at a company during the pandemic that had just become a remote company and then went through that whole like, well, should we go back to in person when things open up or not? And what should we do with our office? So I've been through that as well. I don't know that I could go back to a not remote work style, but before the pandemic, I worked at Datto and I traveled and was on site like all the time and was almost never home. So I've seen kind of many different variations. I think it's very individual and personal, right? It depends what your priorities are and which you're going to sort of be most comfortable with. I love being remote because I think it offers the most flexibility, but it comes with some challenges.
Yeah, it's interesting because Google is hybrid. So right now I have to go in like 2 to 3 times a week. But to be honest, it's still kind of remote because the majority of my team is in different offices. It's not like we're meeting in the same office in the end of the day. We're just, the FaceTime just helps with like, hey, how was your weekend? Or like, do you want to talk about this project of yours? But that's really it. Like at the end of the day, I'm just sitting at the cafe upstairs just working and I'm not really giving FaceTime to my team members. So I kept on thinking to myself, does it really matter to really be hybrid? Like, yes, it helps, but does it truly though? Does it really matter?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that is almost subconscious, or it's like kind of, it's conditioning that you don't really explicitly realize. So for example, at Syncro, we're fully remote and I went a couple of months without meeting anybody, right? I interviewed, but like I didn't meet anyone in person until we had an offsite and I met some of my team members. And so I've had this experience of like there's no office. So there's no like visual cues. What's the culture here, right? I don't get to see people's cubicles. I don't get to see if there's snacks in the fridge. There's all these kinds of cues about how a company treats its employees, what's acceptable behavior, what are the people like who work here? I don't know. What are people feeling today? That I suddenly got to experience by at least having a small sample of people together in a room, which made me realize, yeah, even if all you're saying is like, hey, how's it going? How's the weather? Whatever, being together does convey a lot of information that we take in, but maybe not explicitly, and helps sort of inform our work and our relationships going forward.
Right. I feel like this is something we take for granted. A lot of people are like, I want fully remote jobs, but I had a fully remote internship before. I'm like, I felt just completely detached from the company. The fact that I was hybrid, like even though it's 2 to 3 times a week and I'm not really working in the office, it's still really great to have that physical cue of like, oh, look, there's snacks in the fridge or there's dinner over here. And it's, I mean, that's just like the good stuff, but
Yeah. It gives
meeting your
you,
manager in person.
yeah, it gives you like a shared context,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I totally know what you're saying. The company I worked for before
Mhm.
Syncro, also I never went into the office at all ever, so I didn't even meet
Right.
the team, and it's unnerving a bit. It's like, what is tethering me? Like, what is this company? What is this thing? It's like an amorphous thing, and what's tethering me to it? I don't really know how to relate. So it's good to, I still think there's a lot of value to meeting people in person.
Mm-hmm. And we are actually going towards an age where I feel like there's probably going to be a lot more remote roles as well. What advice do you have for young professionals that are finally going into like either a fully remote role or a hybrid role, as opposed to like before when they had fully in person? Because it is definitely a shift. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, oh my gosh, that's such a great question. I never even thought about it. I mean, I thought about it for our new hires. Oh, that would be really, really challenging. It's one of the drawbacks of remote, I think, is for folks who are really early in their careers, because there's a lot of mentorship and observation and opportunities that come about because of like proximity, just being the one that's there, oh, you do this, visually, physically there, and getting to observe how things are done. I think you have to work extra hard to build those relationships and find those opportunities without being overly eager, right? Which is a turn off, perhaps. So yeah, I think you really have to be more explicit about wanting to take on new challenges and finding those people in the company that are willing to spend that extra time with you, or give you those opportunities. So a lot more communication required, and more deliberate kind of like, this is what I would like, or I would like this kind of project. Conversely, in a remote space, like managers or leaders should be also more deliberate about asking their junior folks, like, well, what kind of career path do you want, or what kind of skills are you interested in learning, so that they can sort of match up the opportunities and the people looking for them.
Yeah, and actually you just brought something up I didn't really think of myself. I think because I started in my role in person hybrid to begin with, but yeah, you mentioned a good thing that like once you graduate from college and now you join a job and it's like completely remote and you're now sitting in front of a laptop, you have no clue what to do. Before, you probably would have a manager coming by to your little cubicle and say like, "Hey, is everything okay?" Or you go for coffee or you do something where it feels like you're belonging there, or that you have some kind of guidance or someone to rely on. But now you're just staring at a computer screen like, what do I even do? Like, how do I start my day?
Yeah. Yeah, I sympathize. At Syncro, we spent a lot of time working on like our onboarding documentation, process, one-on-one, meeting people, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It's never perfect though. And I imagine like, yeah, the earlier you are in your career, the less you know about what you are supposed to be doing, right, the more sort of guidance you need. Yeah.
Well, we definitely learned a lot in this episode. So just a question for you is, what is on the horizon for you in 2023 or for Syncro?
So that's a great question. I think like years, like I said earlier, it's a bit hard to see that far into the future, and it's hard to plan. One thing I found, I think a lot of people felt that definitely at Syncro, we felt ending 2022 was we finally, I think, have collectively acknowledged as a society, as a world, that like it is not that easy to plan a year ahead anymore, which is good because it's a more agile way of living, right? At the same time, it's not the way that businesses are used to operating. They're used to having like 5-year strategic plan, and we shall not deviate, and everything happens in this linear fashion. So I think it's been, one of the good things is that it's forced people to plan in shorter sort of horizons or shorter increments. We have a lot of things that we want to get done on the product. We are getting back out on the road, so events in our space are opening up again, and we're going this year to be in person at a lot of them. So I know that our team is really, really excited about that, and that's something new for 2023 for us. For me personally, I have lots of kids, so I am looking forward to spending lots of time with them. Summer is always really fun, so I'm already I know it's February in Boston, so I'm already dreaming about the summer and the camps and the lake stuff and all the outdoor activities. So that's my 2023, I think.
That's great. So where can we find you on social media?
Mostly on like LinkedIn is probably the best place. Mm-hmm. You can find me there. That's probably my most public sort of place if people want to sort of check out.
Okay, and lastly, what can we do to support you?
That's a great question. I love feedback. So if people have any feedback, what they liked about the episode, what they didn't like, if they want to ask me additional questions, folks can reach me, like I said, on LinkedIn or CEO at syncromsp.com. I answer every email I get. So as long as you're polite and respectful, you can expect a reply. And I love mentoring folks. So if people want to sign up, I'll send them my Calendly and we can find some time to chat too. I love sort of giving back and helping people. And I've had fortunate enough to have a lot of experiences, so might be helpful.
Sounds good. And I'll have Syncro and your social media handles down in the actual show notes or in the description of this video podcast. So the last thing I'm going to ask you is, and I know you hate this question, but what's your one advice to give to anyone who's listening to this?
I knew you were going to do that because I said not to. I should have learned my lesson, huh? My one piece of advice, oh my gosh. My one thing actually is that I know it can be, as a woman in tech, for example, speaking to that part of your audience, it can be sort of overwhelming, especially if you're just starting out to think about, and it was for me, how am I going to go from this first job I have to CEO one day? Or even just to senior or director or whatever, your next sort of level is that you're aspiring to. And I think that I still face this challenge every day when I think, well, how am I going to make a dent in like the number of women leaders in the world, or how am I going to grow Syncro? So my number one piece of advice is like to break that up into smaller chunks that you can sort of achieve, reflect on, and then iterate on. A lot of the work in like building women leaders, when I did the thing on a day-to-day basis, it seemed like, oh, this is a small thing. I'm just going to do this thing today. It seems very not routine, but very, very small, very like inconsequential. It doesn't like, what is this going to add up to? But then over time, that does add up to a lot of different things. So I think what for your own career, just think like divide it into smaller chunks, makes it more manageable. And you'll get there.
Okay, and that's a wrap. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, definitely reach out to Emily or check out Syncro.
Thank you, Christine.